not at all.
If we shift the argument and say, there are certainly a lot of bad ways to move to the cloud and migrate to the cloud, no question. And yeah, I've seen and done myself a number of bad things in that way, especially in just moving the cloud to a virtual computer and think that's it. And now it's just cloud-based.
Yeah.
Obviously really bad. But if you were to do it the proper way, if you were to really think, this is the awesome way, or if you have some example, perhaps some company that you have helped migrating to the cloud and you're really proud of, what would you say the best way or some example of a good use case for migrating to the cloud would be?
Yeah, there are of course like plenty of ways of doing that, but I think that kind of the main point, for example, is that you start from something that is very core of your business, because you're starting a transformation and you want to create an impact. And if you start with, as we talked about, some kind of a idea or POC with some super innovation that doesn't have anything with your core business to do, so you're not kind of the first steps to cloud it's not going to create any real impact or real value for your business. So kind of being courageous enough to do something to kind of move something in your very core. And that's kind of the scary part, because we don't
Everyone
like change.
Is scared about changing.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Mm-hmm. And to be there in the core, to take something that that is valuable but can be even more valuable, and start to thinking in a different way, because that's also the kind of cloud's benefit, is that you actually get to do stuff that wasn't possible to do before. So therefore we should kind of come away from these things we have always done this way. And this is how it works. I have heard
first principle thinking.
So have you heard about first principle thinking?
No, but this is really fun. I learn a lot today. All kinds of theories. So please.
So it's obvious when you talk to a lot of people, we all have our different references, and then all of a sudden we go into a reference that we all been fascinated by something on different angles, and first principle is super cool. But this story really talks about a fascination around Elon Musk, and how Elon Musk has his entrepreneurship. And at the core of this, one of the ideas that he highlights is first principle, which is essentially a philosophical idea from the beginning, but then taken up on understanding it from a business context or an engineering context. So we've been quite fascinated and using first principle as a way to understand what does it really mean to become data-driven is a little bit like, well, if you have an analog process and you computerize on top of that, will that have a 10x effect on your value, or what this is all about? First principle means going back to the fundamental core, understanding what your fundamental core is, and then thinking in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And we have had this conversation when we ask people what we mean with this, and some people ends up in the corner, the business perspective of first principle. So what's the core of your business, right? IBM, Patrick Couch, are the information processing at the core of IBM, right? Yeah. And then understanding that you can then rethink your business. And then, of course, Elon Musk has the whole engineering perspective.
Both, I would say.
He has both, actually. And what's the engineering perspective, Anders?
Yeah, I think you actually phrased it well, even though you didn't understand you were speaking about first principles. But the dare to challenge the way things are done in the usual way.
Yeah.
And the classical example from Elon Musk is like you can speak about Tesla or SpaceX or SolarCity or whatnot. But I think the easiest way to talk about this is SpaceX and rockets. Okay, let's build things that goes into space. And the way it's done today is you launch something into space and then you crash it. And that's like many hundreds of millions of dollars that you just smash in the ground. And does it really have to be that way? Can you rethink it? Can you dare to challenge the way it's usually done and actually think, is there some core physical principles that we can think about to solve this? And perhaps rethink the whole idea and start to have reusable rockets. Well, it seemed to be possible, and suddenly they have Starlink and sending 42,000 satellites into space, and crazy thing. So just rethinking the ways things are done in the usual way, and having the courage to do so, I think is one of the core concepts of first principle thinkings.
Yeah. That's nice that I actually talk about it without knowing.
No, but the why I like first principle is because I've been talking about that and trying to get people to understand that this is not really reinventing the core idea. It's putting something on top of an analog idea. Yeah. So I've been using this without. So first principle I picked up, actually through you, Yeah. And I love it. I just love it as a way to explain, as a metaphor, what this is really all about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the puzzle that we were kind of talking about before. So that kind of helps in structuring this whole kind of thinking. Challenging thinking what is this data drivenness and how does it affect our business from different angles, and what do we need for kind of prepare this kind of change and so on.
So just to close the discussion about what the challenges are to migrate and move to the cloud and become more data driven, I guess you have the 9 pieces, and that perhaps is like an overview of the challenges are, or can you think about other ways to just in as concise way you can think of describe the top challenges?
Yeah, the top challenge is actually to do something beside not be courageous enough to go into the core. And the other challenge is to keep you away from the tech corner as long as possible, and to think around how this is going to impact in this and that. And also to kind of to keep it very simple. Usually you should kind of not overthink it. Because usually we get kind of carried away also, because the change and the impact can be huge just with the very simple solutions as well. Yeah. And that's usually the case. So when you overthink and overcomplicate stuff, so you end up with a smaller value and a lot of money spent on developing something. So start small. It doesn't have to be perfect, and then you just kind of iterate it forward. So
agile thinking again.
And how have you? What is your view on this sort of one fundamental challenge that is talked about quite a lot, data literacy, or the challenge that we don't have everyone in the same room at all speaking the same language or having even a reference point? Typically, then you have business. If I go to a more traditional business, they are fantastic in their domain, but they have no reference point at all to what we are talking about. IT might have some sort of reference point, but they don't understand the business. So we have this translation problem.
Yeah.
So how do you see that part of the challenge?
But that's totally correct. And we usually also have this kind of we have companies who see that the data is something for the IT department and the nerds in the basement. So that's and there you're kind of, that is the data maturity, I think. How does your kind of company how do you say preserve, or I don't know how do you say that, but how they see the data.
Seeing data as an asset is, I think you had that as one of your cornerstones here.
That's super.
But it's quite interesting because as soon as you start looking at it as an asset, you kind of understand that you want processes to manage and maximize the value of your assets.
Yeah.
So I think that's that's a quite easy indicator of maturity.
Yes, and that is kind of the maturity level where you want to be when everybody perceives that as an asset, because then you also get the engagement. Everybody gets interested. If you put money on the table, so there is not kind of a lot left after a while. But if you put kind of in an immature company, you put the data on the table, so there is no owner of that, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden, if you come up to that thinking that, oh my goodness, what all we can do with this data. So then we come to this kind of what I mentioned also, this kind of data trading, when all of the kind of different parts of the organization start to kind of understand what kind of value they're sitting with. Should I put it into the enterprise data lake so that everybody else gets part of that? But what do I get in exchange? So then you start data trading. And that's where the interesting stuff starts to happen. Yeah.
And I know that you have a passion for also like diversity and biases in data and things like that. And let's try to go to that topic soon.
We can go there now, I think. Or maybe wrap this up.
Just one small question before that, because moving to the cloud is, of course, very beneficial from many points of view. It can be economically very beneficial. It can be that you can move faster and develop your products in a more efficient way and simply focus on the core business problem you have, and not having to change hard drives is simply nice to avoid having to do. But there are problems as well. And one problem is that you could have like data safety problems, or you could have data like integrity problems if you move all data to American or Chinese companies. Is that something you want to do all the time? And then the alternative, you have to think about, okay, well, then I have to manage everything ourselves, and that's not easy either. What's your thinking here? Is there situations where, let's take a medical use case or something, some company that have patient journal text or something, and is there a situation where you think, this is actually not a good time to move to the cloud, or at least not for the big American or Chinese companies?
Yeah, it's I think kind of from the principal point of view. So we preserve cloud as safe as on-prem, because you can break into either one, I guess. But I liked it a lot. We had this big kind of digital events meeting point, Solid arranged last week, and we had Telia talking there about kind of the movement data. And I think that kind of thinking that you can actually do I'm going to say shitload of stuff.
That's okay.
It's
an after work.
After work, come on, please.
It's not an American program, so that's good. Okay. So anyhow, so you can do a lot of cool stuff with aggregated and anonymized data as well. So you don't have to put all the details in the cloud. So of course you have to kind of carefully consider what to put in the cloud. And that's also kind of the discussion that we have with our kind of larger customers from a financial sector or medical sector, as you mentioned. So what is kind of what data is okay to have in the cloud, and in what format?
And let me ask you, I'm not sure how involved you are in these kind of discussions. I'm unfortunately a bit involved in, like, should we build like a Swedish infrastructure or a Finnish infrastructure or European infrastructure for data and AI, or should we simply rely on the big cloud providers? And then people think, yeah, of course, we want to be able to have our own. And I think we all agree that there's a big leap, AI divide between the tech giants and the rest of the world. But then the alternative, we had a number of disasters in Swedish authorities. And then they had data leaks and problems where very sensitive data had been leaked. And of course, if you think that the alternative is that you have to manage everything ourselves, and think that you can have the same level of security like super, big tech giants have, that's also questionable. So this is a very tricky thing for me, at least. What's your thinking here? Should we? How can we be less dependent on the tech giants, but still have the security that we want to have?
Yeah, I think what we are looking at with our clients many times is kind of some kind of hybrid architecture, and there is very few of our clients that choose just one cloud. So they usually have like multiple clouds that they are relying on just in case, and then something on-prem as well. So it's a hybrid environment at the moment, and that's a really hard thing to kind of, because there is positives and negatives in both these scenarios, and it's really hard to kind of say that, okay, but why would European cloud be that much better?
Exactly.
And then there is a lot of differences in the cloud maturity comparing kind of with the history background. For example, Germany, they don't even want to use credit cards. So it's because the kind of a storage of personal data is, and then in Finland they're totally crazy about the cloud and everything is up there. So so it's like a kind of also the feeling of security somehow in individuals. But very valid kind of a consideration, and I think we kind of need to have this debate. It's really, really important that we kind of have it up to discussion, at least to be aware of how to build kind of a secure cloud solutions.
Tough problem.
It is a tough. Sorry, I couldn't provide you any better solution for that.
Let's end that note with almost quoting Robert Luciani. let's solve the issues and security issues with more tech. So basically, there are, even if we have it in American setups, we can morph. We can do many things to basically have our own, bring your own keys and do many things that, if you want to, it should be even fairly safe in this way. I mean, like, so there is, instead of, so using tech also to figure this stuff out.
It's fun to hear you promote tech. I love that.
You're indoctrinating me. I love it.